Good morning, ladies and gentlemen in Indonesia, and also good evening, ladies and gentlemen in Mexico City. It is a pleasure for us to welcome you to this webinar, Reemerging the Conquest of Mexico, Underwater Archaeology in Mexico and Indonesia. First of all, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest today from the Embassy of Mexico in Indonesia. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Mexico to Indonesia, Mr. Armando Alvarez, the Consul and Cultural Attaché, Ms. Maria Lizette Aceves Serrano, and Ms. Afionita Putri. I'd like to also welcome the faculty members of Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Dr. Adrianus Lawrence Gerung Waworuntu, our Vice Deans, Dr. Suri Maria Sigeti and Professor Irmawati Marwoto, and all participants of this webinar. My name is Cisanti Arumsari, and I will be the master of ceremony today. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar of Reemerging the Conquest of Mexico, Underwater Archaeology in Mexico and Indonesia is held by the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia and the Embassy of Mexico in Indonesia, in collaboration with the Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. This morning, we are going to have two speakers from the Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. The first one, historian Eduardo Cruzoto, who will talk about the conquest of Mexico. And the second speaker is Dr. Roberto Junco, who will talk about underwater archaeology in Mexico. The last speaker is Dr. Ali Akbar from the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia as the commentator for both speakers. And the sessions will be followed by a questions and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, to start our webinar today, we will listen to the opening speech from His Excellency, the Ambassador of Mexico to Indonesia, Mr. Armando Alvarez.
Selamat malam, teman-teman. I am pleased to welcome you all to the online seminar, Reemerging the Conquest of Mexico, Underwater Archaeology in Mexico and Indonesia. First, I want to convey my gratitude to the Universitas Indonesia for its great support and co-host for this event, as well as to Dr. Ali Akbar from the Faculty of Humanities for being the commentator. Also, I want to thank the participation and enthusiasm of Dr. Roberto Junco and the historian Eduardo Cruzoto of the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico. On August 13, 1521, the great Tenochtitlan, the then capital city of the Aztecs and today's Mexico City, was conquered by the Spaniards, an event that led to 300 years of Spanish colonization of nowadays Mexico. To commemorate this historical event, we decided to share with you the work of our National Institute of Anthropology and History in the finding of the traces of this episode of our history through underwater archaeology. We hope this exercise marks the beginning of a platform to exchange ideas and mutual learning between one of Indonesia's most prestigious educational institutions, Universitas Indonesia, and Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for the opening speech. Next, I would like to invite the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Adrianus Lawrence Gerung Waworuntu, to deliver the welcoming remark.
Thank you, Jisa, for the opportunity. His Excellency, Mr. Armando Alvarez, the Ambassador of the Republic of Mexico in Jakarta, Honorable Ms. Lizette Aceves, Consul and Cultural Attaché of the Embassy of the Republic of Mexico, distinguished professors, vice deans, managers, heads of departments, heads of study programs, my beloved students and distinguished guests. Good morning, Jakarta, and good evening in Mexico. On this wonderful occasion, the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia is hosting a joint seminar with the Embassy of the Republic of Mexico in Jakarta. This is the second joint seminar that we hold jointly. The first seminar was organized as a tribute to Professors Raden Panji Suyono and Miguel Leon Portilla, discussed two major civilizations, namely the Nusantara civilization and the Mesoamerican civilization. The ancient civilization of the Nusantara archipelago is the foundation of the present-day Indonesian culture and its evolution into the future. Similarly, the ancient Mesoamerican civilization serves as the root of the Mexican identity and the foundation for the development of Mexican culture in the present day and in the time to come. The focus of this second seminar is underwater archaeology. This is a very special opportunity for Indonesia and Mexico to share experiences and expertise in researching the remains of sunken boats in their respective territorial waters. Dr. Roberto Junco from Mexico is going to discuss subaquatic archaeology in Mexico and Indonesia. And Eduardo Cruzoto will give a talk on the conquest of Mexico. Meanwhile, our Dr. Ali Akbar from the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia will present his talks on maritime archaeology in Indonesia. I believe that this seminar will not only enrich our knowledge, but will also increase our understanding on key issues related to underwater archaeology. Moreover, through this joint program, the collaborative work between the Embassy of the Republic of Mexico in Jakarta and the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia will be further strengthened. I sincerely hope that we can continue this wonderful collaboration all the way to the future and develop other kinds of joint programs together. Thank you very much and have a fruitful seminar.
Thank you very much for your welcoming remark, our Dean of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our session today, we would like to invite everyone to a photo session. Okay, so please kindly turn on your camera. Our committee from Universitas Indonesia will help taking the picture. Okay, so it seems that we have 4 slides. I will help counting from the first slide. Okay, please kindly turn on your camera. All right, let's start. From slide 1, 1, 2, 3. The next one, slide 2, 1, 2, 3. Slide 3, 1, 2, 3. The last slide, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much, everyone. Next, we will have our speakers deliver the materials for this webinar. I also would like to inform all participants that you may write your questions to our speakers in our chat room. And also please specify or direct your question to one of our speakers. First of all, I would like to invite the first speaker, historian Eduardo Cruzoto from the Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, who will talk about the conquest of Mexico. Okay. Before he begins, I will provide a brief introduction. Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto graduated in history from the National Autonomous University of Mexico in 2016. He is a historian, paleographer, diver, and a researcher at the Subdirectorate of Underwater Archaeology. He won the Gustavo Basprada 2015 Medal Award for Social Service. He is also a transatlantic and trans-Pacific navigation specialist. By obtaining information based on navigation of different types of ships, of different chronologies and nationalities, he also studies the phenomenon of the shipwreck evidenced in the submerged archaeological remains that is currently understudied, with professional interest in the dissemination of knowledge of cultural heritage. His lines of investigation are Hernan Cortes, Discovery and Conquest of Mexico, the Manila Galleon and Commerce in the Port of Acapulco, Shipyards in the Americas and Spain, Project Underwater Archaeology in Villarrica, Veracruz, In the Footsteps of Del Paso and Troncoso and the Sunken Ships of Hernan Cortes, or the Lost Ships of Cortes Project. Catalog of sources for navigation in the Americas, 16th to 19th centuries, in which documents with maritime and navigation themes are gathered. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, historian Eduardo Cruzoto.
Okay, thanks for the words of all the guests. And I compare my screen. And all can I see? And hear me, yes? Okay. 500 years have passed. Precisely today, since the fall of the great Tenochtitlan. And it is time to remember, analyze, and read the history of Mexico again. 10 years before the arrival of the Spaniards, the indigenous people, Mexicas or Aztecs, saw 8 signs that shocked them. A comet, a woman lamenting through the streets of the city, is the name in Mexico City is the La Llorona. Another is fire in the waters, and another bad omens. Now, I will give you a summary of the process of discovery and conquest of Mexico, and then Dr. Roberto Junco will present our research to you. The discovery and conquest of Mexico is one of the most important historical moments of the humanity. The discovery of the New World for the Europeans brought a new vision of both being the other. The new cultures and the new lands were the cause of global struggles for power. I will discuss this later. I will give a brief review of this whole topic in order to arrive at the research that will be presented by Roberto Junco. 1. The discovery, which covers from the arrival of Cristobal Colon in 192 to the Antilles aboard the carabelas the Girl, the Pink, and the Santa Maria, while in the process the conquest of the island of Cuba. Is also great gestated the settlement of the Spaniards and Said Island, and from where 3 important expeditions will live: Grijalva, Hernández de Córdoba, and Hernán Cortés. There is a precedent for expedition by Gonzalo Guerrero and Jerónimo de Aguilar in 1511. This will take place in these years 1517, 1519, being that Cortés, the last and the one that will initiate the process of territorial conquest from the classic vision of conquest, that is, to seize land in the name of an empire. Exploration and alliances. Cortés, after having altercation with Governor Diego de Velázquez and secretly leaving the island of Cuba, he travels following the route of Juan de Grijalva. It first arrived in Yucatan on March 14, Cortés arrived in what is now the state of Tabasco, precisely at the mouth of the current Grijalva River. In Centla, the first battle was presented, after which the Spanish conqueror will be given the Malinche, that you know is the translator, who is a key piece of the process of war and conquest, as this would help him translate indigenous language into the Spanish and the Spanish for the indigenous language.
Lalo, no están pasando los slides. A ver si.
Sí.
Y ponle para que se ponga en grande.
Sí.
Abajo.
Aquí está. A ver. Es que no puedo. Ok, es una o la otra. ¿Se está viendo bien?
No te preocupes, yo con muchísimo gusto, cualquiera del seminario te podemos ayudar a pasar las slides, nada más pásanos el archivo.
¿Aquí se está viendo bien ahí?
Diciéndolo.
Es que ¿sí se está viendo bien?
Se ve bien, se ve muy bien, se ve muy bien.
Ok. Excuse me. Thus, resuming the trip, Cortés advanced on his route and arrived in Veracruz. The first visiting the point called San Juan de Ulúa. In this place, the idea of generating a cabildo was developed, after which Cortés will be called Captain General. However, not is established as such a place where decisions are made. So to speak, the council will be made up of people and will be itinerant. Finally, Cortés undertook once again the sea route. Finally, on Thursday, April 21 of 1519, the day of the Holy Cross, 11 Spanish vessels landed in the Villarrica de la Veracruz. After, this is for San Juan de Luna, excuse me. This is the Villarrica. After lobbying the possible route with enough information about the Great Tenochtitlan, the group of conquerors decided to set up a camp in front of the Cerro de Quiahuistlan, place of Totonacos. Here we have the first port city built in the continental America, and which has a lot, if not everything, to do with the destruction of the ships of Cortés. This idea is abording for Roberto in a few minutes. I continue. Alliances and advances. Cortés applied the strategy that he carried out by Vasco Núñez de Balboa in 1513. Get closer to the indigenous people and create alliances that will help both parties. Now, a first advances was made to the population of Zempoala, where the fat cacique, himself life, who offered military support to Cortés. With this, they not only assured military support, but also support in the knowledge and recognition of the different lands, through which we all have to pass to reach Tenochtitlan. Cortés sent the first letter of the relationship to the King of Spain, with various gifts, some gold, precious stones, feathers, and others, to show them that the connection that should be generated is exclusively between Cortés and the Spanish king. It is at this time, July 1519, when the order will be given to go through or sink the 10 ships, not without first removing pieces of wood and blacksmithing that would be useful for the camp in Villarrica. This is the camp in Villarrica. Jumping a bit because time is short, on September 23, 1519, after 4 lost battles, the Tlaxcalan signed alliance with Hernán Cortés. They overthrew the Aztecs and conquered Tenochtitlan. After this, the army made up Spanish yards and Tlaxcalan arrived to Cholula. In October 18, this place is important because it was the site of a bloody massacre of Cholultecas. During 4 days, priests, rulers, and civil population were killed. In November 8, 1519, arrival in Tenochtitlan. The Spanish arrived in Tenochtitlan. Where the Emperor Moctezuma received Cortés with honors, with Malinche as his interpreter, and hosted him in the palace of Axayacatl. Equaces gives the famous hug between Cortés and Moctezuma. And can you see, this is the image of the Duran Codex. And this image is a street of Mexico, and it's a representation from the hug between Cortés and Moctezuma in what would be the first hospital in continental America, a place that still stands and can be visited here in Mexico City. Days later, on November 14, they take Moctezuma prisoner and begin the siege of the city. In May of 1520, the massacre of Templo Mayor is from Pedro de Alvarado. You remember Hernán Cortés was a problem with the governor Velázquez, the governor of the Cuba, and Cortés will be returned to the Veracruz, to the Villarrica, and fight. In this time, Pedro de Alvarado leads the Matanza de Toxcatl, or Matanza del Templo Mayor, in which the Spanish killed the Mexica while performing a ceremony to the gods. Meanwhile, Cortés was in the Gulf of Mexico. This is the scene of the Codex, the Florentine Codex, and this is the big massacre on Big Tenochtitlan. On June 30, the Sad Night is called the Sad Night, or the renamed by the government of Mexico, the Victorious Night, is in the last month. After the death of Moctezuma, approximately of June 29, Cuitláhuac became the new Tlatoani of the Aztecs, who defended the Spanish and the Tlaxcalan on the 9th of June 30. Cortés mourns his defeat in a tree, which is the episode is now the Sad Night. In November 8, Cuitláhuac dies. Cuitláhuac is the last Tlatoani of the Aztec Empire. Cuitláhuac dies of smallpox, and Cuauhtémoc becomes the last Tlatoani of the Aztec Empire. During this time, Cortés prepares of the reconquest of Tenochtitlan after receiving reinforcements from the enemy peoples of the Aztec, Sucatus of Tlaxcala and Texcoco. Cortés fled to Tlaxcala, where Ixtlisochitl, another Tlatoani from Tlaxcala, the indigenous ruler, offered him all the support with men and stretch to organize and take Tenochtitlan. Thus, between January and April 1521, 13 bricks were built in Tlaxcala, which were dismantled and rebuilt in Texcoco. They got into the water of the lake that leads up to Tenochtitlan in April 28 and set sail on June 1 in 1521. With these ships and the knowledge of naval battles, Cortés manages to besiege Mexico City, Tenochtitlan for 2 months. In August 13 of 1521, the fall of Tenochtitlan. After 2 months of siege and combat, the Spanish, together with their indigenous allies, seized Tenochtitlan by capturing Emperor Cuauhtemoc. The city surrenders and the conquest is consummated. King Carlos I granted Hernán Cortés the title of Governor and Captain General of New Spain. This is what I have collected in a quick review of the discovery and conquest of what is now Mexico. These events, as I previously pointed out, are extremely important for world history. Why? Primarily due to territorial expansion, to beginning of world trade and the different transatlantic and trans-Pacific roads, and the birth of the new culture and the great nation is Mexico. And thank you. It's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto, for the very great and engaging presentation. Okay. Before we continue to the next speaker, I would like to remind our participants again that you can leave your questions in the chat room. Our second speaker today is Dr. Roberto Junco with his presentation about underwater archaeology in Mexico. Before he begins, I would also like to provide a brief introduction about him. Dr. Roberto Junco is an archaeologist, graduated from the National School of Anthropology and History, where he studied a master's degree and PhD in archaeology. He received a diploma in historical archaeology from the University of Leicester, United Kingdom. He is currently an affiliated scholar of the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, member of the Society for Historical Archaeology, ICOMOS, and board member of ACUA. He is in charge of the Underwater Archaeology Office of the Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History since 2017, where he has been working since 2004. Among the projects he has directed are underwater archaeology in the volcano Nevado de Toluca, Manila Galleon, Baja California, maritime archaeology of the port of Acapulco, and underwater archaeology in Villa Rica. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our second speaker, Dr. Roberto Junco, to deliver his presentation.
Well, hello. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having us share a little bit of our history and a little bit of the research that we're carrying out in Mexico. My presentation will consist of 3 different topics, all intertwined, of course. And the first one is underwater archaeology in Mexico, a little bit of panorama of what we're doing at the moment. The second will be a little bit about a very interesting relationship with Indonesia that Mexico has historically and that we're documenting archaeologically. And third, I will center upon the project of finding Hernan Cortez's ships, which you already heard about his exploits in the conquest of Mexico. So let me begin first by showing you a map of Mexico. As you can see, we don't have as much coastline as Indonesia has, but we still have 11,000 kilometers of sea coast, both in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, and the Pacific, as well as all the rivers, lakes, lagoons in the interior of the country. So basically, our office is in charge of doing the research, the inventories, and the protection of all these different sites underwater in Mexico. Underwater archaeology in Mexico started quite a while ago in the 1970s. The people at the Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico began receiving a series of notices from scuba divers that were finding objects in the reefs, in the corals around the coasts of Mexico. And thus our founding mother, in this case, Pilar Luna Reguerena, took upon herself to prepare a team of people to create a space within the institution to take care of this cultural heritage underwater. And our first official project started in 1979 at Cayo Nuevo in the Gulf of Mexico, where a couple of cannons and anchors were found, and thus was born our first underwater archaeological project. Today, underwater archaeology basically deals with the creation of underwater cultural heritage inventories, the study of this underwater cultural heritage, looking at nautical aspects such as ships, for example, maritime aspects of underwater cultural heritage like ports, the preservation, conservation, and of course the social sharing of all this heritage. Where is my, yeah. One of the topics of research that we pursue today in Mexico is prehistoric underwater archaeology. And what we found in some of the caves that are filled with water today, especially in the Yucatan Peninsula, is that early settlers of the country, of the continent, walked in when these caves were dry caves. And as the sea level rose in the Ice Age, the remains stayed inside these caves. Now, these remains are not as old as, for example, some of the remains in Indonesia, like the Flores man, and these very old remains, but still they're fairly old for the American continent. So we have human remains that date to 13,000 years ago, for example, which is quite old for the Americas. I know in Indonesia you have fantastic caves where there's all these different species of our ancestors. So that's one of the topics that we carry out. Here, for example, you can see the remains of a young boy in one of these underwater caves. Another aspect of the research that we carry out is devoted to pre-Hispanic times. And this is all the time span up until the conquest of Mexico that we just heard from Eduardo, 1519, 1521, when the Spaniards arrived in the territory. And it's all these different societies that lived in the territory that were very much close to bodies of water like lakes and rivers, and where we can find a diverse group of offerings and other ritual aspects of the relationship that these groups had with water. You know, among their gods, of course, we have Tlaloc, one of the rain gods, and there's quite a bit of interesting rituality associated to these bodies of water. So one of the aspects that we do research upon is precisely these bodies of water. Then, of course, colonial underwater archaeology, which mainly deals with ships and ports. and where we document wrecks from the 16th, 17th, 18th century, especially associated with the Spanish presence, but of other nationalities too. We have Dutch and English ships in our waters. I will talk a little bit more about the Cortés project, which falls upon this category. Certainly 19th century wrecks. Now we're talking about steamers, a different kind of technology. And for example, this is just the image, a 3D model of one of the sites of a 19th century American steamer. And of course, 20th century underwater archaeology. We have some important wrecks in our waters. This is an American submarine from the First World War that we documented in a 3D model. And those are more or less the areas that we specialized on. Of course, Mexico is a signatory of the UNESCO 2001 Convention on Underwater Cultural Heritage. And that has given us a lot of strength to deal with treasure hunter permits, and also a lot of guidance in how to best pursue underwater cultural heritage. From our perspective, it has been a win-win situation to sign that convention. And among the several findings that we've had all kinds of findings, as you saw, bones, ceramics, but of course also treasures. And some of these amazing treasures that we found can today be seen by the public in museums. So one of the aims of our institute is also not only to do the research to find these wrecks, but also to take them to the general public and make them readily available for the public. Another aspect of our job is, of course, conservation. The conservation of artifacts that have been underwater is a risky, tricky business, and we have the capacity to do this kind of work as well. Certainly education, we do a lot of courses, national and regional, international courses to prepare people for doing underwater cultural heritage inside of Mexico and of course outside of Mexico as well. So that's a little bit of a panorama of underwater archaeology in Mexico today. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this relationship with the Pacific, with Indonesia. That's quite fascinating, actually. This is a map of 1507, and you can see that by that time, the early 16th century, the world was almost fully documented, but not yet. No, the Pacific was still a big mystery, and yet the Pacific was the sea that everybody wanted to go. Everybody wanted to get to the Spice Islands in Indonesia. Everybody wanted to arrive at the Maluku, no, the Maluku Islands. Here you can see it from the same map. The Pacific, America is not really yet fully documented. Here's another map from 1519. You can see the Maluku Islands there represented. And here it's an interesting fact. This is the letter by Hernán Cortés, who we already heard about, conquering Tenochtitlan, to the king of Tidore in the Maluku Islands, and it's dated 1527. This can be the first document of diplomatic relationships between Mexico and Indonesia in a way, but it's almost 500 years ago that Cortés wrote this letter to the king of Tidore, thanking him for helping out the expedition of Magellan that circumnavigated the globe in 1521. So we got Magellan, 1520, arriving in the area, Cortés 1521, conquering Tenochtitlan, but already thinking about preparing ships to go all the way to the Spice Islands. We have other expeditions, Jofre de Loaiza, Saavedra de Cerón, expeditions that depart from Mexico with ships built in Mexico to arrive to the Spice Islands. López de Villalobos in 1542, López de Legazpi in 1565. And this expedition is crucial because after this expedition, the Spaniards find a way back to the American continent. From Asia, they are able now to arrive to the American continent and thus create a route that will last for 250 years, the Manila-Acapulco galleon route. And this route would depart Acapulco in Mexico and arrive all the way to Manila, exchange products, and turn back yearly. So for 250 years, Mexico was connected to Asia. And of course, from Manila, there were all kinds of connections because the Spaniards, basically what they did is they inserted themselves into a very old trading route that was already in place, which was all these Asian Arabs going to Asia, Asians going to Arabia, exchanging all kinds of products and ideas, religion, of course, and many other things, right? So basically the Spaniards inserted themselves to these very old trading routes. And with the Manila galleon for 250 years, we had this wonderful contact with Asia. Of course, in one side, we had the port of Manila, on the other side, the port of Acapulco, doing this exchange. And the exchange basically was silver from Mexico, which was very abundant, exchange for Asian goods, Chinese porcelains, silks, Indian cottons, ivories, carved ivories, Indonesian species. You know, most of the first ships that made their way back were fully cargoed with cinnamon. No, they could be smelled miles before they even saw the ships. And a very, very interesting aspect of this commerce can still be seen today in the Mexican food. The typical food of today has as its ingredients, of course, cinnamon and some of our best sauces. To your left, you will see a wonderful dish, the mole, which is made out of chocolate, chili, but also has cinnamon and clove as part of its creation. So these very Mexican things are impregnated with the flavors of Asia, specifically of Indonesia here in this case. So that's a little bit about this relationship. We're very much working toward this archaeology of Manila galleons, researching several sites of sunken ships, of the ports that were part of this trade, to learn more about this very long-lasting 250-year relationship with Asia. And now I'm going to go back a little bit to this persona of Cortés, whom we are celebrating today, this special day of Mexican history, and which he was a big player, the conquest of Mexico, no? The fall of Tenochtitlan, the victory of the Spaniards, however you want to frame it. It's one of those very relevant dates, the 13th of August. And this man arrived in ships, but we didn't know, and we still don't know very much what these ships look like. And these ships are the kind of ships that Columbus used in 1492 to arrive to the continent in his subsequent voyages to map out the Caribbean and coast of Central America. These ships were very important technology that permitted all these voyages of discovery, these voyages of trade, and certainly of conquest. And so when I was doing my PhD thesis, I was doing some research onto how underwater archaeology started in Mexico. And I found this photograph, and this photograph, if you can see, has a hard helmet diver going into the water. And I was like, what the hell is this? I was really wondering. And then I read a little bit about it. And this guy, Del Paso Troncoso, in 1891, set these divers to look for Cortés' ships. And I was amazed that somebody in the 19th century had the vision to put hard helmet divers into the water to look for these ships. So I decided that at some point we would definitely go and do the same kind of research, but with the tools that we have now to look for these ships. Apparently he did not find anything back then. So that was a topic from my student years that eventually, with a good friend, Dr. Chris Horrell, we decided that we would take upon ourselves to look for these historic ships. That, according to legend, Cortés had burned. According to legend, Cortés had dismantled and then armed much later in the Battle of Tenochtitlan. But we thought that if Del Paso had looked for them, that maybe those ships had been sunk and not burnt or dismantled. So we looked at the historical record, and here Eduardo, who just presented, did a wonderful job at finding all the keywords. And what we found is that all the references, historic references, point that Cortés sank those ships. So how do you look for these ships? And so what we did is we used top technology. We used a magnetometer, and we did some surveys in the area of La Villarrica, this first port that the Spaniards created, and we found these different magnetic anomalies. And after pointing them with a GPS in the map, we went and dove, and we used first handheld magnetometers, and when we were certain of metal below the sediment, then we excavated using dredges. We pulled the sand out, and what we found so far is 5 different anchors that belong to the 16th century. So we think that we might be upon Cortez's fleet. Luckily enough, one of these anchors had a wood stock, and we took a sample of the wood, we dated the wood, and we saw that this wood came from the north of Spain, and that this wood belonged to the 15th century. And so we were right on track. We thought that we are definitely upon something interesting. So we need to still work and find those ships behind these anchors. Hopefully next year we'll be going to Villarrica to continue the work. But so far, 5 anchors have been found. And I think that that makes my 20 minutes, 16 minutes. Okay, so maybe there are some questions that people would like to learn aspects of Mexican underwater archaeology, or the relationship between the Manila Galleon, how it connected us to Asia for 250 years, or maybe of Cortez or Cortez's ships. And I would love to answer any of your questions. And thank you. I tried to write it in Indonesian. I don't know if it...
Thank you very much, Dr. Roberto Junco, for the insightful presentation. Again, for all of our participants, I kindly remind you to leave your questions for our speakers in the chat room. Ladies and gentlemen, next we'll hear the last speaker, or this is more of a commentator of this session, Dr. Ali Akbar from the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia. Okay, so before he starts, I'd like to provide an introduction for Dr. Ali Akbar. Dr. Ali Akbar completed his studies in archaeology at the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia. He is currently a lecturer of Department of Archaeology, Universitas Indonesia, and a cultural researcher. He is also the head of the Center for Research on Society and Culture, Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia. He received the Universitas Indonesia Sasakawa Scholarship and the Habibie Center Scholarship. He was awarded the Best Young Indonesian Researcher of Social and Cultural Sciences by Indonesian Institute of Science. He also had been selected as the Best Researcher of Social and Humanities awarded by Universitas Indonesia. He has taught maritime archaeology at the Faculty of Humanities for more than 10 years and conducted several researches about maritime culture. Now, I'd like to invite the third speaker, Dr. Ali Akbar, to start his session.
Thank you very much. Good morning, His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Mexico to Indonesia. Good morning, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. Good morning, Dr. Roberto and Eduardo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen in Indonesia. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in Mexico. Thank you for the special opportunity given to me to present about maritime archaeology in Indonesia. Most of Indonesia's territory is in the form of waters, especially sea. So there must be a lot of archaeological remains underwater. At the University of Indonesia, we use the terminology maritime archaeology. The definition of maritime archaeology more or less includes underwater archaeology, shipwreck archaeology, naval archaeology, nautical archaeology, and shipyard archaeology. Research on maritime archaeology includes shipwreck in rivers, lakes, seas, and island and coast. Maritime archaeology examines ports, harbors, and various interactions between human on land, and activities at the sea, such as trade, commodities, and shipping. Along the coastline is also quite often found archaeological remains, for example, in the form of ancient port cities that were part of maritime kingdoms in the past. Based on archaeological evidence, maritime remains in Indonesia has been existing since prehistoric times. Hinduism, Buddhism, Islamic, colonial, until the independence periods. In this webinar, we will be focusing on the Islamic and colonial periods, especially the Sabak Kingdom in Tanjung Jabung Timur, Jambi, and the Bantam Kingdom, which was established before the arrival of the Europeans. Expedition and exploration of the world carried out by the Europeans around the 15th and 16th century gave the impression that the area visited by the European was an empty area without residents or local people. If there were residents, then the impression is that the locals were considered still primitive, barbaric, or savage. This can be seen in several illustrations circulating on the internet and in the views of the general public. Actually, the areas have been visited by Europeans. There were already people who had advanced cultures and civilizations. The examples are Mexico and Indonesia. Historian Eduardo Cruzoto already explained to us about the condition in Mexico around 1519 until 1521. So we can see that there had been buildings, fortress, city, and kingdom before the Europeans came to Mexico. Another example is in Indonesia. Before the arrival of the Europeans, there were several big kingdoms, such as the Kingdom of Bantam, which was advanced due to international trade in the spice road. In 1596, Cornelis de Houtman, the first Dutch explorer, had met the king of Bantam Kingdom. Now we will talk about the Lambur site in Muara Sabak, Tanjung Jabung Timur, Jambi. I really appreciate the research done by Dr. Roberto, who conducts underwater research in Mexico using technologies such as magnetometer and then processing by photogrammetry and 3D model. These techniques are effective enough to start the research for archaeological remains underwater. Some of my colleagues in Indonesia also have been using similar tools. However, this time I will give an example of research on the coast. Given the geographical conditions and natural processes that occurs in Indonesia, the sea boundaries can change due to the sedimentation. Generally, sedimentations occurs so that what was once an ocean is now land. We did some excavation and found archaeological remains in tidal areas or in the fishermen's ponds. An example is the Lambur site, which is strongly interpreted to be the location of Sabak Kingdom in Jambi. There was a boat had been found on land. The land was once a river close to the sea or estuary. This is the research area in the form of land. However, based on the map from 1905 or 120 years ago, it turns out that there were rivers in the area. This area is currently called Muara Sabak. In English, perhaps we can call it Sabak Estuary. Based on aerial maps using drones, can also see traces of ancient river flows. Later on, a scan is carried out below the ground using geopenetrating radar to estimate the condition below the ground. After that, we made several excavations carried out and found several parts of the boat. Perhaps this is the bow or the front part, and this is the stern or back part of the boat. In addition, other parts were also found. If we compare to the traditional wooden boats that are still made by the community, this is probably the upper front of the boat. The most common part of the boat is the deck or floor of the boat. This boat is made entirely of wood, no metal, using wooden pegs or duil and tied with palm fiber rope. This technique is known as sewn boat traditions or the stitch plank and last lug technique. The length of the boat is 24 meters and the width is 5.5 meters. The results of laboratory tests using carbon dating analysis indicate the age of the boat is from early 16th century AD, or before the arrival of Europeans, especially the Dutch, to Indonesia. Now we will discuss about the length of Lambur boat, 24 meters. The Sabak Kingdom is estimated to be located in Muara Sabak or Sabak Estuaria, Jambi. In 1511, the Portuguese conquered Malacca. The Portuguese and Spanish then headed to the island of eastern Indonesia to trade. It was during this period that the Lambur boat was probably made by Sabak Kingdom. In 1595, Cornelis de Houtman had been sailing by using 4 ships from the Netherlands to Indonesia. He had been landed in Bantam in 1596. One of the ships is Devkun. Yeah, this is Devkun, which measures 24 meters long. As I mentioned earlier, the Lambur boat, which is almost 100 years older than Devkus, also has a length of 24 meters. So perhaps Lambur boat can sail across ocean between continents. Now let's go to the Kingdom of Bantam. Based on the ancient maps, in Bantam there was a big kingdom before the Dutch arrived in 1596. In Bantam there was already a city wall surrounding the kingdom. There have been many buildings. Based on other sources that are widely available on the internet, such as ancient manuscripts, travel stories of European sailors and merchants, and also old photos, it can be seen that there were many buildings in the Kingdom of Bantam. However, many buildings and city walls were destroyed because of several wars. One of them was the civil war or family war between Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa and Sultan Haji, the war between father and son. The son was assisted by the VOC, a Dutch trading company. The Dutch used divide and conquer policy. Bantam and other kingdoms in Indonesia were finally controlled by the Dutch. Colonialization took place. It is a historical story that we believe to be true, but how about the archaeological evidence? To find it, we must know that the sea in Bantam already had been affected by sedimentation process, so that the land increases as far as 1 kilometer to the north. This is This is the ocean today. This is the fishermen ponds. This is the boundary of the sea about 400 years ago. So we have to do research around this area, which is now land. We use ground penetrating radar. We did excavation and found quite a lot of remains of building structures. We also use drones and three-dimensional models assisted by architects to make reconstruction drawings of building in the past. For example, the Surosowan Palace, which had been the residence of the King of Bantam at the time. Nowadays, we only can see the foundations remain. Based on historical records and archaeological evidence, some building can be reconstructed with drawings. The estimated figures and landscape of Surosowan Palace perhaps is like this. Yeah. There were the Palace of Bantam Kingdom before and at the beginning of the colonialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Akbar, for the presentation. Now, everyone, we will invite questions from the audience. Okay, please leave your questions in the chat box so that our speakers can also see your questions there. Okay. Okay, we haven't got any questions here, but we've received a comment, yeah, from Ibu Retno Mamoto in here. Thank you, Ibu Retno Mamoto, for your kind comments. So I would like to invite everyone, the participants, please leave your comments and also leave your questions too for our speakers.
Santi, I would like to tell something about Dr. Ali Akbar's presentation, that I thought it was amazing, the work that they're doing in Indonesia. And also that I hope that I can certainly invite him to come to Mexico and work with us. We're doing some similar research on some of the port structures. And it would be such a wonderful thing to have him join one of our expeditions. So it's an invitation. We'll see how we manage to get him to Mexico. I think there's just so much that we can do together. Some of the islands in the Molucca had Spanish fortresses for a while that were directly connected with Manila, which was directly connected to Mexico. And some of these old fortresses, the stones are still there, and that could be an interesting topic of that we could do together, Indonesia and Mexico. Of course, there's also the Portuguese presence, the Dutch presence, but maybe making it the differences between each of these colonizer presences would be an interesting topic, to see what was the difference between the Portuguese, between the Spanish and the Dutch, how they dealt with the local populations, the constructions themselves, how did they influence local traditions, etc. I mean, there's just so many lines of inquiry. I think that it's something to look forward to. Thank you, Ali Akbar. And the work in Lambur is amazing. Huh? Sounds really interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Roberto.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Junco and Dr. Ali Akbar. So I think we have one question in here in our chat room, and it is directed to Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, so it's in Bahasa Indonesia, so I would like to try to translate it. So the question is about how does the lembur ship, or in Indonesia, it's perahu lembur, being reconstructed? Is there any similarities with the traditional form of the ship in Indonesia? Okay, so that's the question, so that our other speakers can also understand that. The question for Dr. Ali Akbar.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. We still don't know about the ship looks like. However, based on the technique, we know that that is the common technique in Southeast Asia. Usually, we call it Austronesian boat. We also can find this technique in Pontian in Malaysia, in Butuan in Philippines, in the Vietnam also, and in Indonesia we found it in several sites, such as in Palembang, in Bangka Island, and also in Rembang in Central Java. We call it Punjul Harjo boat. So it is a different technique with European boat or European ship. European usually use metal nails, perhaps made from iron, But in Indonesia and mostly in Southeast Asia, both we use dowels. We use wood nail, and we still make a research about the similarity with the traditional Indonesian boat in the recent day. So perhaps that is my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the answer for the question from Faculty of Humanities, Andriati. Okay, and the second question is already there too. It is directed to Dr. Roberto Junco from IRFAN. The question is, when Magellan and other Spanish explorers sailing the Pacific from Mexico to the Philippines, is there any information about source of navigation they used, like from indigenous sailors, or were they sailing blind through the Pacific? Okay, please, Dr. Junco.
Yes, it's very interesting question. They were sailing blind. They did not know how far they would find land. They knew that they would find land somewhere to the west, but they did not know the distances or the currents. But they were very quick at finding out. Once they reached the first islands, certainly they did get the help of the navigators, the local navigators, where they could find land, where they could find islands with water. But it was a feat, because of course they would take weeks and weeks without knowing very much where they were. And some of these expeditions were in the southern part of the Pacific. So they would arrive, for example, to the Solomon Islands. And some of these expeditions were in the North Pacific, and they would be arriving to the Mariana Islands, for example, and some say Hawaii, for example, and then further west to the Philippines. So it was quite a feat. They knew they would get to land, but they did not know exactly how close it was.
Thank you very much for the answer, Dr. Junco. Okay, we do have another question here from Raul. Okay, so Indonesia and Mexico share similarities in their history. Both were conquered by Europeans, and both have wonderful and rich cultural heritage. To preserve the historic memory and the collaborations among researchers, how they can collaborate in order to improve maritime archaeology. Okay, so this question, probably all of our speakers can answer this one, especially Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto and Dr. Junco. The question from Raul.
Thank you, Raul. I think there's a lot to do. Of course, yes, we have that same kind of experience of the conquest and colonization of European powers, and our very rich local cultures. And certainly there's many things where we can join together and do collaboration. And I think it's just a matter of finding the right connections and just going ahead with it. And we will be enriched by Indonesian researchers. There's a lot of Asian artifacts in Mexico that they can help us understand much better. And as I told you in my presentation, we still use Indonesian species in our food, and they're the traditional Mexican food. So there's just all these different things that we need to find out. And when international collaboration goes forward, everybody's enriched because we exchange our points of view, we exchange our cultural peculiarities, and that is just the best to collaborate.
Thank you, Dr. Junco. Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto, would you like to add something?
No, it's from the last question. I think the question with Andrés de Urdaneta is very important for the tornaviaje, the return from Acapulco, Mexico, and the Indias, and return to Mexico is important.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is for Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, so the question is, how can we as the general public be able to support efforts to explore history from the side of maritime archaeology in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned before, that mostly archaeological remains in Indonesia is in the coastal area. Yeah, so and Indonesia have a big coastal area, the second in the world, yeah, after Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So perhaps if you go to the beach, yeah, and found several archaeological remains, please report to us, yeah. Please report to the government, yeah. And after that, we can make a intensive research at that place. Perhaps it's like that. And of course, we have to make a quick report. Otherwise, it will be damaged. It will be finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Akbar, for answering the question from RISCON. And I've received a question from a student of the Department of Archaeology, Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia. The question is there any similarities between Mexico and Indonesia regarding maritime heritage due to colonialism? Okay, so I think it's directed for all the speakers. So probably Dr. Roberto Junco, can you maybe give some comments on this about the similarities between Mexico and Indonesia regarding maritime heritage due to colonialism?
Certainly. Well, when the Europeans arrived both in Mexico and in Indonesia, of course, they're bringing new kinds of ships. And these ships have also an evolution throughout the centuries. And many of the wrecks that we find in Mexican waters or that you might find in Indonesian waters can track this evolution in the design of shipbuilding, etc. No? Usually they become larger, more potent ships to carry guns, to carry cargo. So all this heritage is quite rich and very rare. I mean, I think both the case of Mexico and Indonesia, we have quite a few of these wrecks, and that's not the case in all countries in the world. I think we have a very rich cultural heritage on the water, and many of these ships that we're going to be able to find about Cortés or other explorers, there's just a handful of examples, and so they're very important for understanding this evolution in seafaring.
Thank you, Dr. Junco. From Dr. Ali Akbar, probably you'd like to add something regarding to similarities between Indonesia and Mexico in maritime heritage due to colonialism, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is very nice to make a research collaboration or joint research. Dr. Roberto already mentioned about pre-Hispanic, the prehistory period. It is also interesting. Yeah, in Indonesia there were a lot of megalithic remains near the gold mining. Yeah, and usually gold mining lies in the volcanic areas. So Indonesia and Mexico is in the Pacific Ring of Fire. So I'm really sure that in Mexico there will be a lot of archaeological remains from prehistoric periods, such as in megalithic buildings, such as in the form of megalithic buildings. And of course, if we talk about colonialism periods, it is very nice to make research about the ancient Pacific trading route. Yeah, we still don't have a lot of information about this route. Usually, we talk about Malacca Straits and the connection with Arabs and European, but we still not make a research about Pacific. Yeah, so it is an interesting area. Perhaps we can make a research together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, we have another question in here directed to all speakers. From Retno Sukardan Mamoto, it seems we are finding more and more materials that cover the foundation of this revealed proof since the 16th century. Has there been a list of topics of research that have been published surrounding, say it, the connection of Maluku and the Spanish explorers and the indigenous encounter of the Westerners, so we are more informed? So the question is about a list of topics of research that have been published surrounding, let's say, the connection of the Maluku and Spanish explorers.
There's definitely historical accounts that trace all the commerce of the cinnamon and the clove between the merchants in Manila and the settlers in Banda, for example, with the Tidore and Hilolo, all the islands of the Moluccas. But of course, when the Dutch came into the area, they started fighting the Spaniards, no? So they even tried to invade Manila, and there were all these European wars going out in this area. It's a really interesting topic. All this, how the Portuguese settled, the Spanish settled, the Dutch settled, how they start fighting each other. That's one thing, no? And then from there you can think anything you want, you know, how the Dutch managed the plantations, how they cut down trees so that only a few places were able to be exploited by them, the BOC. There's just so many topics that we can talk about and that are very current today. There's parts of Indonesia where they speak Portuguese, right? So if you go to certain parts of Indonesia, people speak Portuguese. And I think these are the interesting aspects when we start finding all these little differences, all these little things. And so definitely documentary. Yes, there's documented histories of this relationship.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add something, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto? Oh, I think your microphone is still on mute.
I start. Yeah. The shipment of Tlaxcalans to the Philippines and another countries and another indigenous people from all the countries in Philippines, in another countries, is an important and it's a place to register and analyze the history from Mexico and between the Indonesia and Philippines and Japan and China and another countries. It's only the idea.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have a question from Bayu Kristianto, and the question is directed to Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto and Dr. Ali Akbar. The question is, what were the differences and similarities in the ways that indigenous people in Mexico and Indonesia welcomed the Europeans in their first encounters? And what were the differences and similarities in the ways that Europeans regarded the indigenous people in those places? Okay. Probably Dr. Ali Akbar can give his response first.
Thank you very much. When the Cornelis de Houtman came to Banten, yeah, at the first time, the king of the Sultan Banten, the king of Banten, very welcome to the Dutch, yeah. However, after that, the Cornelis de Houtman go back to the Netherlands, and he reported to the boss, and the boss make a big company in 1602. We call it VOC, yeah. And then the VOC came to Indonesia and want to monopolize the trade in Indonesia, in Banten. So the king of Banten rejected the Cornelis de Houtman and VOC. Yeah, so there are several wars after that. Yeah, and so but we know after that the VOC won the war. Yeah, so I think we already know the rest of the story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Akbar. Mr. Eduardo, would you like to add
something? Okay, yes, I don't have an idea the circumstance on Indonesia, but the first reportment in Mexico was somewhat hostile for both sides, and it's about understanding what another human being is. Let's imagine the other. It's another people, it's another culture, it's another time, all the stuff. It is if we are currently finding a new culture or another thing, it's like aliens, yes. In European is see the indigenous people of Mexico like an aliens with a head, don't have head, have eyes and the mouth in this part of the body. Yes, is only the question. I don't have an idea in the circumstance of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Eduardo Soto. Okay, we have the next question from Sintarda Hari Pratama for Dr. Roberto Junco. The question is, did Magellan himself experience problems during his journey to Indonesia, especially in the life of his sailors in ocean, or maybe like a disease or a hurricane? That's the question, Dr. Junco.
I think I answered it in the chat. But yes, of course, they did suffer quite a lot of loss, and especially scurvy, the sickness that develops when you are not intaking vitamin C. A lot of the sailors died. Out of all the ships and all the men that Magellan set forth with, only 13 arrived back in Spain with their only ship fully loaded of cinnamon.
Thank you, Dr. Junco. All right, the next question Okay, we have questions from Nia Hassana, but I think Dr. Junco has given the answer in the chat box too, right? And okay, so we have a question from Salsa for Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, I'm really interested in the reconstruction of Surosoan Palace. Okay, can you elaborate the process of the reconstruction? That's the question, Dr. Ali Akbar.
Thank you very much. If we go to Bantam today, we only can see the ruins. Yeah, so we must collect it several several sources, such as historical record. Yeah, as I mentioned before, like manuscripts or European travel notes. Yeah, and then we made several excavation box. Yeah, and then we make a reconstruction on the paper. Yeah, assisted by the architects and using 3D models. Of course, we have to see the archaeological remains. So the drawing still based on the archaeological remains. Yeah, and after that, in example, based on the report, historical report, they said the tall of the building is 6 meters. Yeah, we only found 3 meters. Yeah, that's why we added 3 meters more. Yeah, for the drawings. Yeah, so that is the reconstruction process. Of course, we still don't know the exactly form of the palace. However, perhaps it can give more impression for us, yeah, about the Surosoan palace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, so the next question is from Raul. It's another question from Raul, I think. How Indonesia and Mexico can protect their antique relics from the private interest? We saw the auction of artifacts in private collections that affects the cultural patrimony. What happens if the treasure hunters find objects before the archaeologists? All right. So maybe Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto. The question is, what happens if the treasure hunters find objects before the archaeologists?
To find about the the history and the archaeology is a relationship so closer, and from the archaeologist is an important investigation and researcher in all the books, all the articles, all the archives, between all the stuffs, and it's impressionant and very easy to work with archaeologists. I am a historian, and so closer to instruct and research all the things about a ship, for example. In the documents have in times have a exactly point from the shipwreck, and it's not more easy, but have a not heavy work, and I think is the idea.
Let me add a little bit to what Eduardo said.
Yes.
Underwater cultural heritage is protected by Mexican law and also by our signatories of the UNESCO 2000 Convention. So there's a legal framework that prohibits all treasure hunting and or extraction by local people of underwater cultural heritage. But that is not enough, of course. And one of the things that we tend to do a lot is give talks, get to the local level to talk to people why they should protect this underwater cultural heritage, make it theirs, why it is their heritage and why they should be concerned in protecting it. So that we do through museums, publications, documentaries, all kinds of strategies. Basically, there are strategies so that people become our allies. And we've had quite a good turn from people calling us to tell, oh, we found this underwater, we found that, whereas before they would just simply pick it up off the bottom of the water. So you have to work in both things. You gotta have a legal framework, but you also need to work with the population, with the local people to bring them onto their side. And I think that we're doing a good job at that. Many people now in Mexico know and understand what underwater cultural heritage is, and they're willing to protect it. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Junco. How about you, Dr. Ali Akbar, for the same question?
Thank you very much. Treasure hunter is not allowed in Indonesia. Yeah, it is restricted. Yeah, the same with in the Mexico, we are in Indonesia also have a regulation. Yeah, archaeological remains is under protected by national law. We call it law number 11, 2010, concerning cultural properties. So only archaeologists, only researcher can dig on the land and dive on the sea. Yeah, so it is very clear. Yeah, so if you are not a researcher, it is against the rule. Yeah, if you want to find the remains. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your response on this. Okay, so we have more questions. Okay, I've received another question. It's not listed in there because it's on the direct message. There is a question from the Department of Archaeology, Universitas Indonesia. It's for Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, so the question is, well, Indonesia is an archipelago. However, there are only 2 archaeological sites that related to maritime heritage that were conserved, Rembang and Lambur Jambi. Why? What do you think about the underwater heritage? Are they only representing colonial era and the colonizers? How about the local Indonesian at that time? Could Indonesian underwater heritage reveal the roles of the locals regarding their long maritime cultures? That's the question, Dr. Ali Akbar. I will repeat it again. Okay, so the question is, while Indonesia is an archipelago, there are only 2 archaeological sites that related to maritime heritage that were conserved, which are Rembang and Lambur Jambi. Why? What do you think about the underwater heritage? Are they only representing colonial era and the colonizers? How about the local Indonesian at the time? And could Indonesian underwater heritage reveal the roles of the locals regarding their long maritime cultures?
Yeah, thank you very much. The term or the topic of this webinar is about colonialism period. Yeah. However, if we talk about maritime archaeology in Indonesia, we can mention several sites from prehistoric area. Yeah. In example, if we talk about rock art painting, yeah, about the boat painting, yeah, in South Sulawesi and Southeast Sulawesi. Yeah, there are several boat pictures, yeah, from prehistoric era. Yeah, and if we go to Hinduism, Buddhism periods, yeah, such as at 6th century AD, we can see the Borobudur ship relief, yeah, in the Borobudur temple, yeah. The researcher already made experimental archaeology, yeah. They made the boat and it sailed until Africa, until Ghana, yeah. And then if we talk about the Islamic period, yeah, we perhaps only several boats that we have been found, yeah, and we have several World War I and World War II ships in Indonesia in shipwreck, yeah, shipwreck. So we have several shipwreck in Indonesia. However, of course, it is a little number, yeah, comparing to Indonesia's regions. Yeah, this is our difficulties, yeah, because only a small number of archaeologists is in Indonesia. Yeah, perhaps if we can make a joint collaboration with Mexico and another country, we can make a large coverage in Indonesia, yeah, because Indonesia is a big country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Akbar. The question was from Bapak Haidir Ashari. Okay, and the next one is from Saiful Bahri. Okay, the question from Saiful Bahri, it's quite long. Mexico and Indonesia share similar Austronesian culture. For example, the Tapa culture, Amate in Mexico, and Fuya or Daluang in Indonesia. And as you mentioned about similarities in the megalithic buildings, these indicate that both countries have been connected since a long time ago, of course, through maritime trades. I was wondering, how do you think this can strengthen the relation between these two countries? In addition from joint research or fellowship or student exchange, perhaps. Okay, Dr. Junco, would you like to answer this one?
Yes, of course, there's always all these lines of inquiry that are not yet very clear or yet been traveled. So there's just so much that we need to still do. And I guess that once we start doing all this kind of research, we find that the world is a very small place and that we're all related, even if we're like on the other side of the world. And so part of doing this Manila Galleon archaeology or looking for these connections, I'm sure that we're going to find a lot of exciting things. Lisette was telling me about how chili arrived into Indonesian cuisine, and these chilies come from America, right? And so once we start digging into this, we're going to find millions of points of convergence. That's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Junco. Okay, the next question comes from Joko Marihandono for Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto. The question is, from the historical view, there was a close relation between Indonesia and Mexico. I have a question. Is there opportunity to look for the archives in the Center of Archives in Mexico?
Okay, I respond in private, but in the National Archives of Mexico have an interesting documents, and I remember see some from the relationships with the Indonesia and Mexico, and it's pure commercial. The documents I consult, but in the ships, the sailors are from the different countries. If you, I can search, I can help with Joko for research in the documents from the Indonesia relation with Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto. Oh, the next question is still directed to you. Okay, the next question from Maizul Imran. How are the current conditions about the discovery of this passage of the Albarrandón de Ecatepec tunnel in Mexico was originally intended to serve as a public exhibition so that people could visit and learn about centuries-old fusion of elements of Aztec and Spanish culture. Is it true, and why should part of the newly discovered tunnel now have to be closed? Whether the dam system cannot function to prevent flooding from heavy rain for now? Okay, that's the question from Maizul Imran.
Okay, the decision from close the tunnel or the Albarrandón from Ecatepec have two routes. It's the decision for archaeologists and the institute. And the one hand, the pandemic movement, and for another hand is problems with the money. Problems with money. It's don't have the investigations in Mexico don't have money in this time because the pandemic, and the better if recovering the Albarrandón for the in a future have a new researcher, new investigation, new all. This is the question.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto. The next question from Septara Hadian. Okay. I once read an article that said that the Majapahit Empire's army had arrived in Mexico. Is there archaeological evidence in Mexico that can explain the opinion of this article? Okay. Dr. Junco?
Yes. We don't know of any evidence. It'd be interesting to see this article, what it's basing its theory on. There's certainly all kinds of articles, opinions about ancient and long distance contacts, but I have not come across this one, so I really don't know. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Junco. Or Dr. Ali Akbar, probably
yeah,
this.
I cannot give an answer also, yeah. For your information, Majapahit Empire is a big kingdom in Indonesia from 13th century AD, yeah. In several manuscripts mention that the Majapahit wants to extend the area of the kingdom. Yeah, so perhaps you have information about the connection between Majapahit in a kingdom in Indonesia with Mexico, but I don't know about that. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali Akbar. Okay, so let's see again whether we are still having.
Hello, yes, thank you very much for everything. I mean, it was a great, thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It was a great pleasure to stay in this event. For us, it was very interesting to have the remarks of the speakers, because it helped us to understand a little bit more about our ties that makes us get closer, historically speaking, and even with this kind of researches, we think that we can do a lot of things together. So I hope that this could be the start of a new collaboration between Universitas Indonesia and also the INA. And well, see you around. Thank you very much to all the persons who attended today's event. We are very grateful with you, and we are very happy that you were very eager to make questions.
Thank you very much, Ibu Lizette Acheves from the Embassy of Mexico for your remark. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've been having such a remarkable Q&A session, but I'm afraid our time's up. Okay, so before we close, is there anything that the speakers would like to say, each of you, as a concluding remark, maybe, starting from Dr. Junco?
Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you very much, Ali Akbar. It was an honor to present alongside you and Eduardo, of course. And well, to everybody that was in the presentation, thank you. And we're gonna leave our emails here in case anybody has further questions. And we look forward to collaborating with Indonesia in the protection of our underwater cultural heritage. And good luck to everybody. Stay safe with the pandemic. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roberto Junco. Okay, the next one, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto, please.
Thank you for all the guests, and all the people can see and hear this webinar. And the investigation and analyzes the history is a very, very great way, and don't forget them, yes, and protect all the culture, material culture, and I don't know, go to have new researchers and new investigations. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto. And Dr. Ali Akbar, please.
Thank you very much to hear a lot of information from both of you, Dr. Roberto and Eduardo. I gained a lot of information from your presentation. And of course, thank you also for the participants for the question and appreciation. And please stay healthy and perhaps we can make a joint collaboration after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Akbar. So I'd like to thank all the participants for raising important and interesting questions. And of course, for the three speakers there, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto, Dr. Roberto Junco, and Dr. Ali Akbar for giving us such an inspiring presentation and a Q&A session. Okay, so before we close our session today, we'd like to invite everyone in here to another photo session. So we'd be very happy if you all can turn on your camera. And the committee from Universitas Indonesia would help us taking the pictures. All right. We have 5 slides here. Okay, please kindly turn on your camera, everyone. Okay, we're going to start from the first slide. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. Okay, the second slide, 1, 2, 3. The third slide, 1, 2, 3. The fourth, 1, 2, 3. The last one, 1, 2, 3. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the webinar today. We would like to thank the Embassy of Mexico in Indonesia for the support and the speakers from the Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, Mr. Eduardo Cruzoto and Dr. Roberto Junco, and also Dr. Ali Akbar from the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia for the insightful and educational session that we've had. And also for all of the participants. Thank you very much and have a nice day, everyone.